Hello. Hello, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. We are so excited to have you join us today for this agriculture edition of Climate Connections. We'll just allow people to trickle in, but we're going to get started. So before we jump into today's conversation, it is with gratitude and respect that we acknowledge that today I'm joining from the traditional territory of many nations. I'm based in Toronto, so joining from the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I invite you to take some time to think about and acknowledge from whose territory you're joining today. The climate imperative presents enormous challenges for industries that must now align their strategy and operations with the goal of a low carbon economy. As industry stretch up to meet these pressing new climate challenges, there are many exciting new opportunities for the translation of research into impact. Enter Climate Connections. That's what we're doing here today. This is our problem-driven event series that connects solution seekers from industry with researchers and innovators from academia and fosters cross-sector connections to address the climate challenge. This series brings together industry experts who present short reverse pitches on the challenges they see. Through structured conversation with academic researchers, innovators, and entrepreneurs, we're going to unpack and explore their challenges and hope to spark ideas and connections among the audience. So here's a quick rundown of how our event is going to go. We'll kick it off with a bit of an intro, kind of what we're doing now, and we'll welcome our wonderful industry expert panel. Then I'll pass it over to them for each of them to go through a short presentation giving an overview of their real world problem. And then we'll head into a moderated Q&A. So get your questions ready. Feel free to put your questions in the chat during the presentation. And when the time comes, I'll invite you to use the raise hand function and unmute to ask your question. So for those of you who are less familiar with Foresight, Foresight is Canada's clean tech accelerator. Our big, hairy, audacious goal is that we see Canada become the first G7 country to achieve net zero. To do this, we bring partners together to identify, commercialize, and adopt clean technologies needed to address today's most urgent climate challenges. Using our Helix 5 model, we bring together industry, government, academia, investors, and innovators to address today's most urgent climate issues and support a global transition to a green economy. And there are many folks from the Helix 5 model represented in the event today through our panelists and through audience members. So thanks to everyone for being here with us. We work across 5 main areas at Foresight. We have our accelerator program where we support companies in different stages and sectors to achieve their technologies, scale or commercialize their technology solution, accelerate their technologies. We run innovation challenges for industry partners who want to improve their processes or reduce their environmental impact. We support companies in capital attraction and in export development. And we create ecosystems in which clean tech can thrive, connecting the different stakeholders in the sector. I want to give a huge shout out to our Climate Connections partners. We are very proud of the academic partnerships we have in this event, and we have many more collaborators in promoting these events. In order to meet our climate commitments as a country, we will need new solutions, and we are very excited to be engaging with thousands of super bright and talented researchers across these organizations to make sure they are working on the most pressing challenges facing the sustainability of industries that underpin our economy. These institutions represent over 100,000 students and tens of millions of dollars in equipment that we need as part of our transition. So I'd like to thank them for helping to make sure that we have a full room today. So thanks to entrepreneurship at UBC, Simon Fraser University, and the University of Victoria Impact Investing Hub. So with that, let's dive into today's event. I am so thrilled to be joined by a fantastic set of panelists. We have Dr. Woo-Soo Kim, the Scientific Director of the BC Centre for Agritech Innovation, Emily Seed, the Executive Director of the Northern Ontario Farm Innovation Alliance, Shondell Sabad, co-founder of Prairie Vertical Farms, Janelle Wells and Brian Prystupa, both senior product owners with Farm Credit Canada, and Mark Richards, the owner of Richards Rolling Acres. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We're going to get into those presentations right now. So once again, we'll be hosting a facilitated Q&A at the end. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat if you have questions as the presentations are going forward. And we look forward to hearing from everyone. So first up, I would like to welcome Dr. Woo-Soo Kim, who once again is the Scientific Director for the BC Centre for Agritech Innovation. Over to you, Dr. Kim.
Thank you very much, Heather, and thank you for having me here today. Can you go to the next page first? Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Woo-Soo Kim, Scientific Director of the BC Center for Agritech Innovation once again. So briefly, I want to introduce BC CAI in short first, and then coming back to our idea about the carbon sequestration and the carbon-related program, and then I'll give the question to the audience. So BC Center for Agritech Innovation, I'm proudly introduce BC CAI. BC CAI is a Simon Fraser University initiative launched last year that aims to develop more productive and diverse and resilient food supply chains together with all the stakeholders in British Columbia. So in collaboration with the government partners, agri-tech stakeholders, industry partners, agri-food producers, and post-secondary institutions, BC CAI focuses on the development and testing and piloting of agri-tech solutions, ensuring they are ready for commercialization, actually, and the practical implementation. This organization funded by Pacific Canada and the province of BC. BC CAI is strategically positioned to elevate BC agri-tech sector. So BC CAI actually have three main functions. I just put those functions here for your information. So we create and maintain, manage agri-tech industrial projects together with BC based companies. So BC companies bring the idea and the needs from them, and then we bring all the stakeholders from academia and another end user companies together to create these industrial projects. We aim to create more than 40 projects in next 5 years. This is funded by again federal government together with the provincial government. And second key function we have is education and upskilling program. So basically, we want to upskill our community members in the agri-tech. So any types of new technology-based education, we fund. So BC CAI funded this 100% to run this program for agriculture and agri-tech communities in BC. And third key function is we BC agri-tech network building, actually. So ecosystem is important in BC, right? So we would like to make a workshop and some the events to make the stakeholders coming together. So BC CAI can be the center to build this ecosystem. So nowadays, Canada's agriculture sector is facing critical challenges, as you know, the climate change adaptation, increasing competitiveness, food security, long-term sustainability, and unfilled labor gaps. So access to labor, food imports, processing capacity, supply chains have been disrupted a lot. So next page, please. I think you know these kind of data a lot. So global emission, left side is global emissions are on the rise after roughly 20th century and 21st century, and recently significant. And we are focusing on serious efforts, right? Rely mostly on the reductions to bend this curve. And on the right side of the slide, unfortunately, this is GIF, but you can probably imagine this color, right? Brown color comes from the bottom to almost to the end of our North America up until around 2100. So in about 100 years, BC eventually, or the Canada can be similar like California, almost the desert. So this is really dramatic change. So climate change is not anymore kind of theoretical, right? And food shortage and wildfire, flood, and recent wildfires and drought, right? As you can imagine, those are all real at the moment. So global boiling, really. So next page, please. So what's the role in agriculture in this the climate change and the global boiling, any solution, right? So figure here shows the relative magnitudes of greenhouse gas emissions from sources like highest to lowest emitters, CH4 from enteric fermentation, as you may know, and then the nitrous oxide, right, from the manure, and then indirect emissions of N2O2. So this figure also shows absorption of CO2 from the atmosphere by soils. This is the key point today I want to discuss. By soils in approximately the scale of emissions by manure and the indirect emission. So modern agriculture has not been kind to soils, right? So billions tons of carbon have been lost to the atmosphere or eroded away. So regenerative practices, the government emphasizes this a lot, and then we know this a lot. Regenerative practices can increase the soil health and store carbon, slowing climate change. So, and generating carbon credits that can be sold eventually. So, but calculating the benefit is somewhat tricky. The biggest barrier to the widespread adoption of climate-friendly farming is the lack of practical way to quantify the soil carbon gained through a regenerative methodology, right? So could you coming back to the first page again? So now question from me is here. Sorry, the the previous one. Previous? Yes. So I want to put the topic of carbon offset program here. So researches carbon and nitrogen processing a long time, right? So to accurately estimate soil carbon storage and sequestration for farmers, right? Our research and development efforts are concentrated on developing predictive models so far. Predictive model, which is sometimes not that accurate, right? Can we explore the feasibility of using distributed sensors or Internet of Things devices for more precise soil carbon detection in order to have certain area fields? Are there engineering opportunities to enhance the accuracy of soil carbon estimation? These are the questions I brought today. I don't know how many of you heard about recent carbon offset program or carbon kind of incentive related companies. Company like Indigo in USA. Indigo, not a bookstore in Canada. Indigo is actually the middle player between the big producers and the farmers, for example, right? So getting from incentive from the big producers like Apple or any other commodity producers, they can get that incentive and then shed it into the farmer side. So farmer can get, for example, $20 per the tons of carbon oxide, something like that, right? So they calculate this kind of carbon based on this model, right? So predictive model. So my question here is, from the engineering perspective, can we distribute this kind of cost-efficient carbon, right, the soil carbon detecting sensors, or any kind of distributed methodology to measure more precise carbons for, right, the farmer's incentive? This is my question today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Kim.
Thank you.
With that, like I said, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. We will have opportunity at the end to have a bit more of a real-time dialogue, but I would like to pass the mic over now to Emily Seed, Executive Director of the Northern Ontario Farm Innovation Alliance.
Thanks, Heather. So yeah, as she said, I'm Emily Seed with the Northern Ontario Farm Innovation Alliance, or NOFIA for short. I was born and raised in Northern Ontario on a beef farm, and we're based in New Liskeard, a small agricultural community that's located on the Ontario-Quebec border right on Lake Temiskaming. So growing up here, I've kind of grown up with a passion for agriculture in Northern Ontario and have been working to support growing that industry further. Next slide, please. Next one, please. Thanks. So I'll start off talking a little bit about NoFIA and what we do to give a bit of context to Northern Ontario. So NoFIA is a not-for-profit that works to advance agriculture across the North through various applied research and innovation projects. So we do everything from very applied on-farm projects while also doing more advanced research at the 3 agricultural research stations located in Northern Ontario, but then also do some broader industry research that benefits the Northern Ontario as a region. And our broad mandate allows us to support many different sectors in the industry, depending on what the grassroots needs are at the time. Much of our work is accomplished through collaborative partnerships with other industry stakeholders. Next slide. For those of you who aren't familiar with Northern Ontario, so this is a map of Northern Ontario, which happens to be the majority of the land base in the province of Ontario. And it's broken down into 11 districts. So as I said, we're located in the Timiskaming district right now, but we support all 11 districts across the north. Most of the north is based on the Canadian Shield and covered with boreal forest, but you will find unique pockets of extremely fertile soil suitable for agriculture are in different parts of the north. But because of our large geographical spread and our smaller population size, this creates a lot of unique challenges when it comes to supporting the diverse agricultural industry in the north. So things like distance to markets and accessing inputs for agriculture, we don't necessarily have a lot of the infrastructure located within Northern Ontario itself to be able to support further processing and further access to markets. So that can be a really big challenge, as well as being in Northern Ontario and having those lake effects from the Great Lakes and the James Bay coastline. We tend to have a much shorter and cooler growing season than other parts of Canada. But thanks to recent developments in technology and some climate change, this has allowed agriculture to really thrive in Northern Ontario. And it tends to be a bit of a misconception in the north that we can't really produce a lot, but when you actually come and visit agriculture in Northern Ontario, you can see that we can produce everything from a variety of different cash crops to livestock to fruit and vegetables within reason. A really good example of that is in the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen an increase of soybean production in Northern Ontario, thanks to both technology development as well as, again, some of that warming climate allowing for a bit of a longer growing season in Northern Ontario. Next slide, please. So the problem that we're looking at is land access for agriculture. So as I had mentioned, there's pockets of land that would be really suitable for agricultural production in Northern Ontario, but primarily a lot of that land is crown land or just hasn't been accessed for agriculture previously. And most of this land is in what we call the Great Clay Belt area, which was previously farmed 100 or so or more years ago and is now was abandoned and covered in brush now. It's all grown up again, but it's there and available for agricultural use if we needed it. Next slide, please. So to provide a little bit more context on this, the recent census data showed that Ontario lost 4.7% of its farmland over the last 5 years, which equates to about 319 acres of farmland lost per day in Ontario, which is quite significant. So eventually people are going to be looking for more agricultural land so that we can continue to support and grow food for people in Ontario and beyond. And that's where Northern Ontario comes in. Back one, sorry. We have really, because of the land that we have, Northern Ontario has huge potential to help meet this need, especially with our changing climate, allowing for advances in what can be grown in our climate, even though we still have that shorter season and cooler climate, and there are challenges that we face that are unique to Northern Ontario. There's huge potential there. But a couple things that are needed behind that. Research is needed to ensure that any land converted for agricultural use is done so in a sustainable way. There's been some research done on this through institutions like the University of Guelph, over the last 10 years, looking at things like carbon sequestration and how that's impacted when land is converted for agricultural use. And there's been some positive indicators there showing that land in agricultural production tends to sequester carbon a bit better. So that's been a really interesting finding that has been positive towards accessing this land for agriculture. But we're also competing for land with the other two major industries in Northern Ontario, such as mining and forestry. So we need to be able to collaborate with them as well as other Indigenous and remote communities to ensure that we're accessing this land as a community and working together to make sure that it's being used in the best way possible. Yeah, so the question really is, how can we sustainably increase land that's being used for agricultural purposes in Northern Ontario? Next slide, please. And I just wanted to put in a little plug for our website, farmnorth.com, which is an information hub for agriculture information and research in Northern Ontario. So if you are interested in more information on what agriculture looks like up here, this is a great place to go. Next slide. That is all from me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emily. Now I'm going to pass the mic over to Shondell Sabad, who is the co-founder of Prairie Vertical Farms. Over to you, Shondell.
Hey, good morning or afternoon to everybody. Thanks for joining, and especially thanks to Foresight for this opportunity to be able to speak in front of all of you today. And if you could flip to the next slide. I guess I'd like to start off with something real. This is a picture from one of our harvests that we recently did at our farm in Montreal. Obviously the future of agriculture faces many challenges, and I'm really looking forward to being able to discuss, a few of them here today with you. I'm going to touch on the full overall, vertical farming, but I'm going to focus this presentation on the main, the main point, which is the challenge. So if you could go to the next slide, that would be great. At Prairie Vertical Farms, we're Canadian-based commercial scale indoor vertical farming company. So by that, I mean very large scale. We grow high quality romaine lettuce and leafy greens at competitive pricing. And the challenge that we wanted to solve was we wanted to reduce the import, or with the need to import produce into Canada. So as such, our target customer is the retail distribution center, not the end use customer itself. And that's what scale does. And the reason for this is obviously, we see it almost every day on the news. The water crisis in California really does dictate that we find a localized, large scale commercial solution for produce production in Canada, just given that the increased probability of California at least reducing, if not eliminating, exports to Canada is a real possibility, and obviously a very large food security issue for Canadians. Now, for us in vertical farming, for the most part, we check a lot of sustainability boxes, but we are very heavy power users. So sustainable, reliable, low-cost power is a must for our operations. And as such, this is my challenge. How can we develop an innovative, cost-effective, and sustainable energy solution to reliably power a commercial-scale indoor vertical farm, ensuring stable and uninterrupted operations? Next page, please. So just a little bit of background on this challenge. First of all, large-scale operations, we tend to fall into the industrial category, which in most jurisdictions comprise of the largest power users. So some of the key characteristics of this market are increasing and volatile power prices. Secondly, would be rapidly increasing transmission and distribution charges. Now, those are the main challenges that we face in this business. So, we in this industry tend to have a relatively stable selling price for our produce. So essentially what we've created in each of our operations is a power to lettuce spread, I call it. So stable selling price to the retailers and a very volatile input price. It's non-correlated. So it does represent a potential fatal flaw in vertical farming operations. And if you followed the industry over the last couple of years, you'll see that some of the largest players in this space, especially in the US and Europe, have gone under. And it's primarily due to, not taking that spread into account and managing it effectively. So all this being said, our farms operate 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So we're a very rateable and consistent power user. But having said that, unlike some operations, for example, Bitcoin mining, reliability is a must. So if you look at this chart, it does break down the market, and you can see that, especially here in Alberta, there is a fairly large segment of the market that does self-supply. At least in the work that I have done, and this is the part of my challenge to everybody here today, is self-supply seems to be our best alternative. But again, I'm always looking to dig a little deeper. Next page, please. So just a couple of additional factors, just to dig a bit deeper into this. There are really three components to the overall power price. The total price is the most important factor to the farm, but really you do have to break it down and look at each of the three inputs individually, because what this will do is this will help manage and mitigate risk. And we see this in many other jurisdictions as we transition to a cleaner grid and a greener grid. Costs to get the power to the consumer tend to increase drastically. This is a lesson, of course, we have learned, especially in Europe, places like Germany and other jurisdictions that have transitioned to a more renewable power supply. And they're also proving to be true here in Alberta. The chart at the top, figure 6.4-3, what that does is it really has shown that the overall power price, and you can see there that it's increased about 44% over the 10-year period from 2009 to 2019. That's the top chart. And this is being driven primarily by an increase in and distribution charges, which have increased at an annual rate over that same period, 24%. And you can see that in the bottom on the left-hand side in the little table that's there. And as a result of that, the T&D charges have made up an increased percentage of the overall power bill. So these are the things that we look at when we start digging into this a little bit deeper. And, based on some of the past statistics and where we're going in the future, I can only assume that we will continue to see this trend continue. So what is important to note is that the power cost itself, for example, the natural gas used to generate the power, in this case in Alberta, represents a relatively low inflation rate. And the other thing that I want to mention is that the overall cost of power represents the second largest cost for a vertical farm. So that increase in volatility for this commodity really does, is a contributing factor to success or failure. Next page, please. So this is just really a summary on some of the ideas that we've come up with internally in terms of how we can manage that volatility and perhaps reduce our cost and increase the greenness of the power that we're generating. So currently most power in Alberta is generated using natural gas. And of course, that's just been an easy and cost-effective solution to transition away from coal. And you can also see from the chart that renewables currently make up about 15% of the mix. And this has actually increased about 70% over the last 10 years. So a really good effort, especially here in Alberta, to transition to some renewables. And of course, the goal of any indoor farm is to utilize sustainable power, wherever possible. And what that does is just helps us reduce or eliminate our carbon footprint. So just based on that, I've highlighted 3 alternatives here. And I know there's a lot more, and I'm looking forward to some of the discussion that's going to happen today and over the coming weeks on this. So, but I think it might be a good starting point. Obviously, before I get into these, one of them is we could move to a low-cost jurisdiction, or pardon me, a greener jurisdiction. That would be, say, Quebec or Manitoba, where the majority of their power is generated by hydro, and then we could export our lettuce. However, part of our mission is to bring the economic benefits of lettuce production back to the local level and eliminate that last mile challenge. Those are also goals. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind, because you know, an easy solution for us would be to set up in Manitoba or Quebec and then just export. So here are the 3 possibilities to consider. Number 1, we can self-generate with natural gas. And of course, that has certain advantages, which, you know, you can see on the chart there. You know, and the big disadvantage is moving forward, where does natural gas fit in the or in the power mixture here in Canada? Secondly, we could co-locate with a renewable power provider, whether it's solar or wind. Now that has huge carbon advantages for us, but the disadvantage becomes reliability without state-of-the-art battery technology. And then of course, the third thing, and we've looked at this extensively, is just to aggressively manage our grid load. You know, what I like about that is there are tools to be able to do that. The disadvantage is it does still expose us to the increase in transmission and distribution charges. So last slide, please. I'll just finish off by saying that, you know, in conclusion, our goal is really to balance sustainable, reliable, cost-effective energy. That's really what we're trying to do here. You know, and you can also see vertical farming is you know, touches 9 of the 17 UN sustainability goals. So you know, we do go a long ways in making the world a better place to live, but addressing power will go a long way to making that even better. So on that note, I'll finish, and I just want to say thanks to everybody for being part of this session today.
Thank you so much, Shondell. There is a quick question for you in the chat if you wanted to respond there. And while you're doing that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Janelle Wells and Brian Pristupa, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, both senior product owners with Farm Credit Canada.
Perfect. Thank you for having us. Do you want to advance to the next slide for me? Okay, so hello everyone. I am Janelle Wells and I am here with Brian Pristupa, and we are from Ag Expert, which is a subdivision within Farm Credit Canada, or FCC for short. So together we're going to provide a brief overview of Ag Expert and then jump into our challenge. So if you want to advance the slide. So first off, we're going to explain what our software is for those not familiar with it. And then we're going to move into what we've been doing with sustainability, along with the research we've done, our observations, and what we have observed, what we've discovered. And then we will provide you with our challenge question. So first off, Ag Expert is a cloud software that is solid, simple, and built for the farm. Our goal is to help producers digitize their books. And to do this, our program needs to meet their needs and be easy to use. Advance for me. So Ag Expert has been with FCC for over 20 years now. Prior, it was owned by a company named Settler. And traditionally, the software was known to be a desktop program. And about 7 years ago, we moved into the cloud. One benefit to moving into the cloud is that it enables us to partner with other ag tech companies in the industry so that we can create a data ecosystem. What this means is that we can act as a hub so that our customers can connect with our program with others that they use, so that all of their information can be stored in one spot. The goal of this is to avoid people from having to re-enter their information that they already have in one program in our program. And some notable partnerships that we have include John Deere, McCain, Climate Field View, Alliup, and Plaid. Can you advance for me? Thanks. So we have 2 programs that are offered to customers. We have an accounting program, which is specifically designed for agriculture, and we have a field program. And this program is where farmers can track all of the activities and inputs they're using to help them understand their cost of production. So we have three main goals, and one is to make sure that our customers' information is shareable if they so choose. So we want customers to be able to easily share their data with their accountant, agronomist, or other professionals that they work with just the click of a button. We also want to make sure that this is accessible for our customers. So we want Ag Expert to be available on any device. And our field program even has a mobile device, which has an offline mode so that customers can enter their information even when they're not connected to a signal. We want our customers to have their information at their fingertips and that their information is consistent with everybody who's using the program on the farm. We're also ag data transparent. And what this means is that Ag Expert customers own their data and we just keep it safe for them. This means that our customers choose who to share it with and we will never share it on their behalf. They always have the ability to take their data with them if they so choose. And we go through a yearly audit voluntarily to show that we continue to protect their data to the highest standards. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Awesome job. Thank you, Janelle. So yes, I am Brian Perstupa, and like Janelle, our roles are largely responsible for leading our development teams and ensuring that our products tomorrow are better or even better than they are today, is what I should say. So specifically, I oversee like the integrations and connections part of Ag Experts. That's about half my desk. And then the other half would be focused on sustainability, which is why we're both here today. But you're probably wondering what the heck is like farm management software, a cost of production tool, or this accounting tool doing in this chat. So I would love to segue into that with this portion up here. And spoiler alert, it is going to be very similar, or our challenge, I'll say, is going to be very similar to the one that Woo Soo had presented, but let me fill in some of the blanks for you there. So specifically on the field side of our product, so yes, it is a cost of production tool, but what that means is any activity that is happening on a grain acre or farm is being tracked in our software. So where the fields and the boundaries are, what is being planted, what is being applied throughout the year, and then ultimately what is coming off, or what is the yield that is coming from that. So that is all tracked in an easily intuitive way. A lot of that has been done manual historically, and now with our move to the cloud, as Janelle had mentioned a few years ago in our API technology, we're able to allow our customers to opt in themselves in a safe and secure way. So that has opened up a whole bunch of different streams as far as our value chain goes that we're able to support, including potato sector specifically. So for those unfamiliar, in the potato sector, any contract fulfillment between a grower and processor, those recorded acres need to be tracked and shared between the two. So in our software, we're able to report on the Potato Sustainability Alliance's data parameters that they require through our API technology. The second bucket that we're supporting when it comes to sustainability would be around the 4R certification process. So again, for those unfamiliar, and the fertilizer reduction targets that have been set, the 4R process would be along the right place, right rate, right time, and right amount. And so we have an overarching use case to get our program to have users enter their information once and share it with any other program that they need. So one of those is opportunities with Fertilizer Canada and the 4R process. So we're going to prove out that the information entered in Ag Expert field can also be reused there. And then arguably, probably the biggest opportunity that we would see and most relevant for this group here would be around the measurement of greenhouse gases, including carbon, that we believe the data parameters that field is already tracking would be able to be reused again. Next slide, please. So yeah, with the background and where this is kind of sprouted from, we had a hypothesis, I'll call it, with all of that data that rich and valuable data that our customers own and are tracking in our product could be reused and repurposed in measuring their carbon output for their operation. So one of the things that we had learned is there's different optics and attitudes in the industry. Canada is obviously a very large and diverse country, lots of different farm management and growing practices across as well. So we wanted to come up with a solution that would be able to, regardless of where you are or what you're growing, at least have a model where the information that you're tracking in field will also have this output of giving an idea of what your sustainability footprint would be on your farm. So one of the ways that we checked in on this was with how we validate a lot of our information for feature enhancements, and that would be with our farmer sounding board. So a lot of things that we develop are grassroots or farmer driven. So we went to them and said, what does sustainability mean for you? What would you like it to mean? What are those big gaps? What would you like to learn? And carbon came up a lot when it comes to growers, producers, farmers in Canada. So one of the things they said is they just want a place where they can, start to learn, grow their literacy around what it even is, and then leveling up from there, having an idea of what their operation is doing when it comes to their sustainability footprint. So that gave us a guidepost of coming up with a solution, leveraging that information already that they're tracking in field, and coming up with a low touch, high value tool that would be coming from their field data. Again, the main use case for our product is a cost of production tool so they can make more informed business decisions throughout the year when it comes to their financials. But what if we could open that up to impacting what they're doing as far as sustainable practices go? So that led to an experimentation with a GHG predictive model that we ran our data through. It was successful when it comes to certain sectors in different areas of the country, but I wouldn't say it's a full serving Canadian agriculture model yet. So that's something that we want to continue exploring as far as, a solution that'll work for the diversity that is Canadian agriculture. And then I do want to go back to the point that Janelle had made about Ag Data Transparency certification. So that is very, very important for us that our customers own their data. We are able to anonymize it and aggregate it for internal purposes only, for enhancing our products and making them better. But when it comes to sharing that information or the data that comes from that, that's where we have a bit of an issue with our user agreement and that certification that we have with ADT. So how might we communicate, some of these findings with a predictive model, and making sure that at the farmer level, industry level, government and academic level, we all have the same information. So that leads us into our challenge. And next slide, please. Which is a two-parter. So sorry for the mouthful here, but we're calling it Storytelling with Data. And how might Ag Expert, our farm management software, calculate the sustainability footprint, especially carbon, in an easy and cost-effective way while still allowing farmers to economically produce food needed for a growing population? And then moreover, especially on that point with Ag Data Transparency, how might we track the progress of the sustainability measurement so that farmers, government, and industry can be on the same page with the same information? Seeing some thumbs up from Wusu. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you both for that presentation. I'm loving the cross-pollination that we're seeing across the different panelists. This is fantastic. With that, I would like to pass the mic over to Mark Richards, who is the owner of Richards Rolling Acres. Over to you, Mark.
Mark, I believe you're muted.
Sorry about that. Good morning or good afternoon for me. Luckily, I got back to the office just in time to do my presentation. Thank you for moving me to the end. I had an appointment I had to be to this morning in Windsor and participate in the first half of this over the phone in the car. So we're a decent sized farm in southwestern Ontario. We grow processing tomatoes for the local processor here is Conagra Brands. We grow sugar beets. We're members of the Michigan Sugar Co-op, and we produce corn, soybeans, and wheat to round out the rotation. Farmed together with my cousin for the last 15-20 years, and we manage about 3,000 acres together. Future planning is we're splitting up on field crops. We share a tomato contract and share the work in sugar beets. So when I didn't prepare a slide deck for this, so you get to look at my ugly mug on the screen for the whole time I get this talk. So I had fun with that. We when I got the presentation format and asked one question, I guess I'm going to tie right back to the first presentation. What can we do in agriculture to mitigate the effects of climate change? And when I say that, I look at the effects in my operation over the last, let's say the last 3 years. We've had years of extreme wetness, followed by some drought. And we've had years of extreme drought, followed by extreme wetness. So how do we continue to produce in an economical fashion, continue to maintain our productivity, farm in a sustainable manner, and keep our production levels at a profitable level? So in answer to that, in our case, and then there's further questions that come from that, who should public funds be used to encourage farmers to practice more sustainable functions on their farm? And if so, how do we measure that? How do you compensate those that have already done it? How do you measure the effect? All those questions come up from that one big question. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of what we do and what the system has been on our farm. And it's not something that you can do overnight. And along the way, we've used a lot of various technologies to kind of help us get to where we are today. So we started about 10 years ago. Well, actually, no, we started over 30 years ago in no-till production for soybeans, wheat, and we tried corn. Didn't have a lot of luck being able to maintain our production levels in corn, but we have been 100% no-till wheat and pretty much 90 to 100% no-till soybeans for the last 30, 40 years. Partway through that, as I was coming into the operation 20 years ago, I looked at a couple other practices we were doing. So one was we would put cover crops on the high erodible ground, particularly ahead of the high value crops, tomatoes. At that point, we didn't have beets. And I looked at the effect, the net effect of that cover crop on that soil type. And that's generally a lighter soil type that had poor water holding capacity, may have had infiltration problems. But why wouldn't I want to share that effect across the whole acreage, even though the low ground, we historically thought you had to make it black in the fall, so you had it dry in the spring, blah, blah, blah. Incorporating the use of cover crops is one of the first steps we took on an overall basis for not only tomato production, but looking at were there benefits in some of the other crops. And we'd always underseeded winter wheat to clover, but it's typically you would spray it out late in the fall, plow it, and then you'd have to work the ground 3 or 4 times to get it flat enough and plant corn. And we knew there was a benefit to that cover crop in the rotation. So once we started looking at cover crops, then you come up with some other issues. So cover crops should be, when you talk about regenerative or sustainable agriculture, keeping a living root in the soil for 365 days of the year is one of the goals that I personally have for operation. There's a whole bunch of pluses to that. It helps with the mycorrhizal activity below ground, which helps with the nutrient cycle. And I'm not going to put a fancy picture of the nutrient cycle. Look it up if you want to see a nutrient cycle, particularly the nitrogen cycle, because that's one of our highest cost inputs and one that we use in 4 out of the 5 crops that we produce. And managing that with the use of cover crops has been economical, let's say. The next step, I said, well, if we're seeing the benefits in no-till in corn or in soybeans and wheat, and we see some benefits in the soil, if we are going through that ground and working every acre, so call it broad acre tillage every 3 years, are we negating the effects, the beneficial impacts that no-tillage system had for those 2 years or 3 years we had it in the system? And how can we maintain that but still maintain our productivity? And that's when we decided to adopt strip tillage. So for those of you who don't know, strip tillage is just working a portion right where we're going to plant. So in our case, we're working about 8 inches out of 30 and planting the crop right down that 30-inch strip the next year, which brings us to the use of technology. Technology was necessary to make that achievable. Now, the old technology was a marker, and have to have a marker, hydraulic arm that went out and marked where you're supposed to drive the next pass to keep your rows in line. And then the next spring you would follow the strips. And that was very hard on a person because you had to pay very close attention. You had to drive dead nut straight in order to keep the crop in the zone where you put your fertility and where you had the groundwork. Come enter the picture auto steer. So we were really early adopters of auto steer systems, automatic steering systems that read off a GPS and drive the tractor straight down the line. With the adoption of the RTK technology and auto steer, we were able to initiate the system of strip tillage. So now we're at the point where we're only strip tilling and no tilling. So theoretically, 70% of our ground is not getting any tillage done, and we are trying to maintain a cover crop living root in that strip all the time. There are challenges with that because you still have to have a wide enough weed-free, competition-free zone. The other technology we use is farm management software. So I've dabbled in field, but John Deere Operations Center currently, and I don't know how long it'll stay that way, is a free software that allows me to manage my guidance lines, manage my productivity records. It doesn't give me a really good crop rotation planning tool, so I have those on spreadsheets. But we can keep track of all the inputs. We can keep track of the line, and the most important thing is keeping track of those lines because we want to be on that same strip year after year, even 5 to 10 years out. Sorry, the slides would have been hard to follow anyway. So just think about the system as it evolved. We went from full broadacre tillage where you plowed everything. We went to some no-till with still broadacre tillage, and now we are just strip tilling 8 to 10 inches out of every 30 inches and planting the crop right in that strip. So my question is, the challenge question is, how do we encourage agriculture as a whole to adopt practices that are more sustainable, can mitigate the damage and potential catastrophes from extreme weather events? My answer has been adopting a system that gets to the point where we have better water infiltration, better fertility, better nutrient cycling within the field. But the broader question is, how do we encourage, or what other technologies can we use to help improve the adoption of these sustainable practices? On another note, and building on that, we are also involved, or I've also been involved with the use of robotic planters, or call them autonomous vehicles that are completely programmed and they plant 24 hours a day. They don't have to take coffee breaks. So the first year we used a farm droid, which was if you go on YouTube, you can find the farm droid working. We used it. It did not fit our system of minimal tillage and strip till. This year, the reason I like the farm droid so much, it was 100% solar powered. It was slow but accurate. The product we use this year, the machine we use this year, is an agrobody, an agro-intelli roboti. It's like a little gantry tractor. A gantry tractor is a tractor that carries an implement between the two wheels, so your wheel tracks are always, you're sharing wheel tracks back and forth. So I think I'm going to stop the presentation there. I apologize for not having slides, but I thought they were optional. And to be honest, we're right in the middle of tomato harvest, and we are starting up the beet harvest this week. So a little bit busier on the farm, and there's not been, tomato harvest has not been without its challenges, somewhat due to weather. We had a 1 year in 85 flood that took out 20 acres of our production. So we were dealing with that in the last 3 or 4 days. So I'll sum it up there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. And no worries about not having slides. And sorry to hear about how challenging it's been this season. We really appreciate you being here, and thank you for that fantastic overview. So with that, we're going to head into the moderated Q&A. Please, again, feel free to use the chat, and also feel free to use the raise hand function, and I'll invite you to unmute. I'm going to start with a first question to all of the panelists. Thinking about the academic community and researchers who might be on the line, what do you wish that academia understood about your challenge that you presented today? How could they help you? Anyone want to start?
I can jump in first. I think a big piece that that we focus on a lot in Ag Expert is bringing the end users into the problem we're trying to solve. So a lot of times it's easy to say, you know what, we have a solution, let's push it out. We really need to involve those boots on the ground to make sure that what we're thinking works with the industry, and it can't be done in silos.
I was going to say the exact same one, Janelle. I think in academia, very good at isolating the problems in theory, but as soon as once it goes into practice, that's when we see, oh, had we brought, say, farmers in earlier or sooner, that would really help with like the discovery portion of the problem they're solving.
I'm hearing
Great.
that too. So jumping in I have two hats as a scientific director of BCCI, but I'm a professor in the mechatronic engineering in SFU. So I've been about 6 months in BCCI, but 13 years in academia, right? So I feel a lot of gap between academic research and field and the practical field. And I felt that a lot during last 6 months. So silo is a big issue in academia, and we need to have a more collaborative environment together with farmers and producers, together with academia, to solve these issues. Yeah, thank you.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, and I think I would just add on to that. That's a great point, that collaboration. And we've been fortunate in vertical farms to see that collaboration work and produce something really, really good. I think the other thing that I think would be very helpful is, fail first, right? Let's get halfway there. Let's try it. And because the trying of it will lead to, I think, faster positive outcomes. We don't need a perfect solution. If we can have something just to try, then everybody learns from it.
So I'll make a comment. There are opportunities for producers to work with research organizations. So I'm involved in 2-3 projects most years. One is it's the on-farm project where they're basically assessing what my current practices are doing to my soil. So they've taken a baseline, they're following through the rotation. Some other stuff with the robotic trials, they do intense sampling and following, because they follow a robotic field compared to a non-robotic field. And we get all kinds of comparisons there. So there's lots of data being collected on what we're doing for real. It's just, how do you transfer that knowledge to the guys that think me and my buddy that do all this stuff are nuts? Because our cross might not look as pretty, but we're still trying to maintain production and profitability. And I think sometimes profitability is probably more, in my mind, profitability is more important to the producer than productivity is, or at least it should be. Because it's not he who grows the most of any crop, it's he who takes home the most money from growing that crop. And whether it be a niche or whether you're just really good at efficient use of nutrients and keep your overall costs down, there's 2 schools of thoughts on that. So
Great. Any other thoughts? Okay. We are accepting questions from the audience. If we don't have any coming in yet, maybe I will continue to ask questions of the panelists. Of the challenge that you shared with us today, kind of where does this fall on your priority list? How balancing other needs and priorities in your day-to-day. How significant is this for you?
Yeah,
Chantal?
for us, and I think for all vertical farmers, it's the most important thing. Prior to the invasion of the Ukraine by Russia, 41% of indoor vertical farmers had never thought about power pricing. Never. They never considered it. And for most of us, if it's not the second highest cost in our operation, it's the first. So it should be front and center. And the more minds that we can get around this, and then to move towards, because it's easy to find cheap power, right? Just go wherever there's coal. But the idea is then to balance that with sustainability and reliability. So I think it's the thing I've thought about the most every day.
I would say for Egg Expert, again, just this challenge is very important for us too. So first and foremost, we want to continue like enhancing our products and making them even better for our existing customer base already. But with that, on our short and long term product roadmap is like this ability to help producers understand what their carbon footprint is, what they're doing, what sustainability means for their operation. And we think that our solutions that we have and the solutions that we need to build yet are going to be a very strong stepping point for that. Because again, I think there's still some attitudes that like maybe sustainability will go away. That's something that we have like a fundamental vision of, like, we don't think it's going away regardless of what color is in Ottawa. We want to help support this mission of like doing the right thing. And it starts with data. So as a first point of that data coming in, we think that we're in a strong position to do that. So to answer the question, it's very important for Egg Expert and FCC.
Yeah, just to add on to that, a lot of that, it's also about empowering our producers with that type of information so that they know what is going on in their agricultural practices. It's really easy to make assumptions on what's happening. And with data, it just helps strengthen management decisions and tell the story of what's actually occurring.
Anyone else care to jump in?
Well, no, it's kind of first and foremost in my mind is how to maintain productivity and profitability. At the same time, you question yourself every night you go home. Is what I'm doing having a negative impact on the overall business I'm in? And if it does have a slight negative impact, is it actually making an impact in being more socially moral on mitigating any damage that I could possibly do to the climate? Another thing I thought I want to drive. So since we're not having a lot of questions, another thing I thought of, there's another sector in agriculture, and it's probably not tech that people think about. As I'm driving down the highway, I am watching loads of grain going both directions on the 401 because I drove for an hour and a half before I got to the office. And I'm here to tell you that I'm sure I met a load of soybeans going to Windsor to go to the ADM plant, and I was traveling east in the lanes with a load of semis going to Hamilton to get processed at their facility up there. The logistics question, or the logistics solution to moving commodities, particularly ag commodities, within, I swear there are millions, if not billions of dollars to be made and saved there. Plus, I think, Chantal, you brought it up in your presentation, you don't want to go to the lowest cost place to get your electricity, because then you had to trigger a carbon footprint because you got to move it to your market. And the logistics of ag commodities is an area that I think we could probably reduce a lot of carbon, and it's related to the trucking industry, if you could figure out how to get the closest grain to each facility to that facility, as opposed to, when we go and price our grain on the open market, the buyers are offering us a price to have it go here. Maybe pay me that price, but if grower B that lives right next door to that ethanol plant, he sold his grain to come to the ethanol plant that's next door to me, why don't you just don't tell me where my corn's going, pay me the same money and take it to the closest one and take his to the other one? Just, it's grain is grain, corn's corn, beans are beans. Not, there's different varieties of beans, and we have, yeah, but anyway, you get my point. So just another thought that popped up that's related to the whole, how can we be more sustainable? But it's something I don't feel is in my control because it's such a big animal.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Mark. And such a tangible example as you were on your way to this conversation. We do have a couple questions coming in now. So one from Elise, and then we'll go to you, Beth. I see your hand raised. Elise in the chat is wondering, how would you define a successful collaboration with researchers?
Great question, and I want to promote the BCCI once again. So BCCI, BC Center for Agritech Innovation, is kind of experiment now, right? We want to make a consortium between the academia and the producers and growers to make a project together. So it's not easy to define success for collaboration with academia, but I think we need some more exploration and experience more and more we need to meet individual stakeholders to see their what is their needs and what is their solution from academia, etc. So I think we need to meet frequently between stakeholders and then create some opportunity to solve issues together.
We do a lot of work with researchers to try and encourage them to communicate the results and get them out there from academia to the grassroots where the information is needed. And for us, the more that we can help bridge those gaps and be a connector and be involved in the projects that they're working on, the more that we can help them get that information out to the grassroots and create more awareness about the work that's going on so that we can help prevent some of that siloing. So for us, communication with researchers is really key.
That's great.
And I'll wait shortly, just a short comment on that. The successful collaboration with researchers is one I don't really know they're there doing the research, they get results, and it doesn't change how I do things.
Fantastic. Okay, Beth, over to you if you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, so my question is, let's say, there's a solution found to your problem, your challenge. How quickly do you see the industry adapting adopting this solution? And what barriers do you see to a solution to your challenge being adopted?
I can quickly comment on that. I think a lot of it depends on, I guess, how embedded your industry already is. Like, for example, indoor vertical farming is a relatively new industry. So obviously there's many challenges. And when some of those challenges are solved, they're relatively easy to implement because we don't have legacy infrastructure and legacy assets. Perhaps in traditional farming, it's a lot different. So I think it depends on who you're selling your innovation into, which market, as to how fast it will be adopted. That's to say that for us, if we had a solution tomorrow, we would be able to implement it almost immediately.
Mark, I'm curious your thoughts about that one, knowing that you have piloted a few things and I'm sure you are in conversation with other farmers who are looking at these same types of problems.
So the adoption of practices to be more sustainable that I've taken on, and I have a pretty close friend that he's a much smaller operator, and we joke he kind of comes up with the idea and then I end up kind of commercializing it, or he does the beta in 2.0 and I do 3.0 up. But anyway, the biggest thing I find is there's that historical background in a multi-generational farm where they've always done it that way. It obviously works because they're still here and they're relevant. They're making money, they're making crop, they're burning fuel, they're burning carbon by ripping the land up every year. And why would I change if it's more work for me? And that's the biggest thing. It does take, it's more, and it's not the kind of work that they're used to. You know, they're used to the work where you went out with a tractor, you pounded the dirt, so you plowed for 24 hours a day with 3 different guys in the tractor, and you made everything black, and then you get spend all kinds of time in a truck. And they like to drive a tractor. Like, let's be honest, they want to be in that tractor because that's farming. It's not. I'm an ag expert is a good example of the field. It's management of your assets, and your biggest asset is land. Management of your assets, management of your time are 2 big things. And that's where we've seen a boon in technology. I think since I started farming is the amount of technology that's available to me to help me manage all the inputs, all the outputs, and measure what do I have left over the year and do comparisons. The accounting package and the field side both work hand in hand. But the biggest challenge to people adopting these practices, they have to work. They want a surefire answer, but I can't give them that. And it's going to vary depending on what kind of ground you are, what kind of client. For instance, this year, I'll give you an example. This spring in our area, we were dry. We were a little bit late getting to the field because it was too wet. We started planting probably in hindsight is 2020, a little sooner than we should have. We pushed a little bit of ground, and then it never rained for 6 weeks. Well, those are 6 very important weeks. The broadacre tillage guys around me looked like rock stars this year. They got that groundwork, they put it in the moisture, they got the crop up, and it looked great. Mine, where I'm planting in the strips in between cover crop, and the cover crop was there a little too long, took a little too much moisture away, and my crops kind of were stunted a little bit. But then when the heat came, mine weren't as stressed. But they don't see that. They saw their corn was taller than mine. Therefore, I'm an idiot, and we're going to keep working all our ground. So, and how do you? It's a conceptual thing you got to battle with with adopting practices. And I don't think mandating them through government regulation is going to work either. You're just going to get a bunch of guys in tractors driving down the 401 to Ottawa to rah. And we don't want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very complex.
I might be a little bit cynical, but it comes with the calendar getting further along. So.
Yeah, it's important insight. I have another question
I would just like to add on to that. I think a lot of it too is what we notice is trust. Getting that information and figuring that out, it's making sure that information is not going to be used against somebody as well. So there's a huge trust aspect, because especially with sustainability, it's a delicate subject.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the nitrogen fertilizer usage reduction program thing that came up this year, if you read the white paper on that before they actually introduced it, man, it made the guys out west look like they were throwing urea and nitrogen into the wind and for no good gain. And they had tripled or quadrupled their use of the products. And it's not right. That's how they measured it. So that's a good example of information being used against them.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Janelle. Thanks for bringing that up. Another question for the whole panel. Emily, I'm going to come to you first this time. What have you tried so far? Any solutions that have been explored? Anything that you can share about that?
I would say that our challenge is a bit of an really complicated underlying issue to all of the work that we're doing. A lot of our projects that we work on to support producers in agriculture in Northern Ontario, it's great, but if they can't access land for agricultural production, then it's really not helping them at all. So some of the things, there's different programs in place right now to support producers with land clearing and tile drainage to help get land into production, but there's only a limited amount of private land available. So there's a lot of kind of like an onion, a lot of layers to the issue, like accessing crown land. There's a lot of red tape around that. How can we better work with forestry and mining, which I think is a really untapped collaboration that I think we in agriculture should be doing more work with those other 2 major industries to see how we can better utilize land and work together on that end. But yeah.
Great. Wusu, same question for you. Oh, you're still on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. So the challenge, I mean, the question I toss is about the recent activity-based, basically. So the example I told you about the company name Indigo, they heavily rely on one of the researchers groups predictive model in USA to predict the carbon estimation. So we haven't actually tried soil carbon measurement by using the Internet of Things device or sensors, but I think that's the way to go from consortium of my team here in SFU and Western, kind of including University of Alberta and then University of Victoria. We now having a consortium here in order to have that kind of opportunity in near future. So by combination of, for example, soil sensors and vegetation monitoring and weather climate data, and including with the GPS and data analysis coming from like Brian and then Janelle's team, something like that, can make a combination opportunity for us to predict more precise estimation for the carbon incentive program. So long way to go, but I think we need to do that direction. Thanks.
Thank you. Chandel, same question.
Well, I think I've gone to my background really, and of course here in Alberta, there's some things that are much easier than others. You know, like I said, if we were in Quebec, this wouldn't be an issue. Everything's hydro, it's all subsidized, power's cheap. You know, but then there's other challenges. So as a trader, we have started examining self-generation utilizing natural gas as an input, and then speaking with some technology providers so that we're prepared for, say, 2030, and looking at carbon capture technology, carbon recycling, obviously, because we need the carbon within the farm itself, and you know, utilizing the resource that's most abundant out here. And what that does is that our all-in power cost probably goes down, and plus it stabilizes and goes down by about 2/3. But obviously looking for other innovative solutions as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Janelle and Brian, same question.
So I think one of the first things that stands out relates to a lot what Mark has been sharing, and that comes down to the profitability side of things. So like our Janelle and our boss is a farmer, so like he understands first and foremost that like we can't let there be a detrimental economic impact with any solution that we want to have. At the end of the day, producers are running a business here. So that's why there's such desire for us to come up with a low touch, low cost, especially, but high value solution. So similarly to what Wusu was sharing, like again, as I had kind of said in our presentation there, we think that a lot of the information that we are tracking in field already is highly valuable in some of these predictive models. And yes, we've got a prototype built, we've even got a beta built, and it's very good information, and it helps clear the blank page when it comes to my understanding of what my operation is doing sustainably. However, there is still, you know, some questions around the accuracy of it and some ground truthing with soil organic testing or some of these different models that Wusu was referring to. But for us, we want it to be a starting point. It's not a carbon credit program. We just want to help our customers make more informed decisions and, you know, have more information when different organizations are coming to them with carbon credit programs, or if there's potential incentive programs with different financing options as banks start to, you know, incorporate those sorts of things. So what we want to do is try and get in front of that, not create a whole bunch more work or add an additional cost on top of that, because we know the business needs to be successful first. But then hopefully have some additional value derived through the scoring solution that we're working on right now.
Awesome. Janelle, anything to add to that? Perfect. And then Mark, you shared some of the practices that you're implementing. Is there anything you can speak to about how you've seen success in that being an inspiration for other farmers, or programs that have encouraged other farmers to kind of uptake these more sustainable practices?
So some of my background, I'm the past chair of the Innovative Farmers Association of Ontario. And I'm also a member, it's a group called the Ontario Soil Network. It's kind of a leadership training, kind of people of like mind and like philosophy to talk about and support each other when we have these failures, or when we try something new and it doesn't all work, or you want to try something, you know, somebody else may have tried somewhere else in the province, and they work very well. To encourage people outside of our, call it our bubbles or our silos or our immediate area that think the same way we do. It's a slow process and we have to be careful. You can't make promises that aren't necessarily going to come true. You can't make claims that are unrealistic. And when I give presentations based on what I'm doing, I always emphasize the fact that I am looking at how I can maintain my profitability while at the same time, my biggest goal is to reduce the amount of time I spend in the field, reduce the amount of time I'm on the land, reduce how much fuel I'm burning, reduce all that stuff for a variety of reasons. The number one reason, so I can spend more time on my boat all summer. Like, and that's a joke around here, around my community is, well, Mark wants to do that so he can spend more time on the boat. So I have something else to do with my time is basically what that means. And does that drive me to build efficiencies into my operation? Probably a little bit, probably a lot. And what I'm trying to do is build systems that have built-in efficiencies so it doesn't seem like more work, it actually seems like less work. But you're accomplishing more things and not having as much of a carbon footprint as what I'll call the normal way to do it. So I'm not normal. Is basically what I just said.
Fantastic. And I think spending time on the boat during the summer is a wonderful way to spend your time. So good on you. We're coming into the end here. I see a question in the chat. Adumosu, and apologies if I pronounce your name incorrectly. If you want to quickly unmute and add a little bit of detail to the question for Janelle and Brian, I'll invite you to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just sort of looking at how Ag Experts sort of looks at specific innovation ongoing, that basically in terms of collaborating for data points, for instance. So I can speak specifically about CropMind Inc., where they're focused on tree fruit growers in terms of making decisions as regards pruning and thinning on the farmland, specific operation costs of about 56% of an orchard management cost. So I was just trying to sort of get a good overview of computer vision solutions and collaborations generally, and in terms of with Ag Expert.
Yeah, so good question. The short answer of it is we're technology agnostic, so we will work with anyone, but most importantly, there has to be value for our customers. So we call that our triple win. What is the win for Ag Expert? What is the win for our partner technology solution? And then most importantly, what is the win for our mutual customer? And in a nutshell, that is how we assess and evaluate who we partner with. But I put our contact information in the chat, so we can always connect one-on-one afterwards as well.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. I'm going to ask one more question. Some of you have already shared contact information in the chat, but where can our participants get in touch with you? Feel free to put contact information in the chat or say it right now. Or folks can always reach out to the team at Foresight and we can help facilitate introductions. Awesome. Thank you so much. I want to thank our panelists so much for this really fantastic conversation. It was a really engaging panel, engaging presentation. So once again, thank you for being here. If you want to join our next Climate Connections event, we have the mining edition coming up on October 18th. If you scan the QR code there that's on the screen, you can see the registration page, and we hope that you can join us there. And with that, I just want to say one more huge thank you to all of you who attended, to our panelists for their fantastic presentations and insights in the discussion, and a final thank you to our partners with UBC, SFU, and the University of Victoria. So thanks again, and I hope to see you all at the mining event.